A moment at Garter Day has been presented as a dramatic incident that suddenly brought attention to alleged tensions within the British royal family. According to the claims in this story, Queen Camilla tried to move into the space between Prince William and Princess Catherine during the procession. King Charles allegedly stopped the procession and told Camilla to return to her position. If this claim were true, it would not simply be a small ceremonial disagreement, because, according to the story, the events behind that moment had allegedly started around 12 days before the ceremony. But one important point must be made clear. Many of the dramatic events described in this story have not been independently confirmed. They should therefore be understood as reported or alleged claims, not as confirmed royal facts. According to the story, 12 days before the ceremony, members of the royal household gathered at Windsor for a rehearsal of the procession. Royal family members stood in their assigned positions, while the production team prepared the camera angles and ceremonial movements. The story claims that during this rehearsal, Camilla's attention repeatedly focused on Catherine's position and visibility on camera. The allegation is that Camilla wanted Catherine to be placed somewhere where she would be less visible to the main television cameras. It was also claimed that there was a discussion about changing the formation. But during this rehearsal, Prince William allegedly objected to the idea. According to the story, William made it clear that Catherine would remain beside him and would not be moved to the back. This is where the alleged conflict is said to have begun. The story claims that the matter did not end after the rehearsal. Instead, Camilla allegedly made another plan to change the procession arrangements on the day of the ceremony. According to the narrative, a handwritten procession chart was prepared. It allegedly left a space between William and Catherine, with Camilla supposedly planning to stand in that space. If that claim were true, it would be more than simply changing someone's position. The order of a royal ceremony is planned in advance, and making an unauthorized change could be considered a serious matter. But this is where the story makes its biggest claim. According to the narrative, William already suspected that something might happen during the ceremony. He allegedly arranged for the activities in the operations area to be monitored. The story further claims that one of Camilla's assistants replaced the original procession document with the alleged handwritten chart. Then, the day of the procession arrived. Large crowds had gathered in Windsor, and people around the world were watching the royal family. Cameras were recording the important moments of the ceremony. And then, according to the story, Camilla allegedly tried to move into the space between William and Catherine. But what happened next is described as the most dramatic moment of the entire story. King Charles allegedly stopped the procession. He raised his hand and told Camilla to return to her assigned position. Within seconds, the atmosphere had changed. William and Catherine allegedly moved forward together, while Camilla was forced to step back, at least according to this account. But one major question remains. Did Charles already know what was about to happen during the procession? And if he did, what information did he have that allegedly made him intervene in the middle of the ceremony? That question leads us to what the story claims happened after the ceremony, including the alleged private meeting and the evidence that was supposedly presented. And that is where this story takes an even more serious turn. After the dramatic moment that was allegedly seen during the Garter Day procession, the most important part of the story is said to have begun. If we follow the narrative, the real question was why King Charles allegedly stopped the procession in the first place. According to the claims, the answer came after the ceremony. A private confrontation between some senior members of the royal family is said to have taken place inside St. George's Chapel. The story claims that Camilla questioned Charles about why she had been stopped publicly and why he had intervened over her position. But according to the narrative, Camilla did not know that William allegedly had evidence. The story claims that William showed surveillance footage on a tablet. The footage allegedly showed a palace assistant changing the procession chart. Along with the footage, an alleged handwritten document was also presented. According to the story, this document had been used to replace the original procession plan. If these documents really existed, the issue would go beyond a simple mistake during the ceremony. It would raise questions about who had ordered the change to the procession and why a member of the palace staff had become involved. However, it is important to make this clear again. There is no independent confirmation of the hidden camera, the handwritten chart, or the private confrontation described in this story. During the alleged confrontation, Camilla reportedly questioned what evidence existed against her. The story then claims that William presented the same documents that were described as evidence against her. In other words, the person who allegedly believed there would be no record of the change was supposedly faced with that very record. The story then gives King Charles an even more important role. According to the claims, Charles already had a document prepared and had allegedly made a decision before the ceremony. The narrative says that Charles made it clear to Camilla that this kind of dispute could not be accepted when it involved the public image of the royal family and the future of the monarchy. But did Camilla really face an official punishment after this? This is where the story makes some of its most serious claims. According to the narrative, within the next 24 hours, Camilla allegedly lost several ceremonial privileges. It was also claimed that she lost access to one of the entrances at Windsor Castle, and that Catherine was given authority connected to it. The story further claimed that Camilla's royal schedule was limited, and that her appearances with the younger generation of the royal family were reduced. But these claims have also not been independently confirmed, and the story does not end there. It also focuses on the palace assistant who allegedly changed the documents. According to the claim, he was removed from his palace duties. If this sequence of events were true, it would represent an unusual internal palace dispute, where an alleged decision by a senior royal also affected a member of the palace staff. But the biggest claim comes next. According to the story, Camilla was removed from the royal family's central activities and sent to live at a remote residence. However, there is no reliable basis to treat the claim that she was placed under house arrest as a confirmed fact. Still, the narrative raises a much bigger question. Was this really a story about a serious power struggle inside the royal household involving William and Catherine? Or was a dramatic story created and expanded through social media and royal commentary? Because throughout this narrative, one point keeps coming back. William and Catherine are seen as the faces of the next generation of the monarchy, and Camilla, after a long and difficult journey to becoming queen consort, has faced a very different challenge. But was there really a conflict between her and the Wales couple that became so serious that it reached the public stage during Garter Day? That is what makes this story even more interesting. Because if the procession incident was simply a misunderstanding, there would be no need for such a large conspiracy behind it. But if there was some truth behind the allegations, another question appears. How long had this alleged tension been building inside the palace? And most importantly, was King Charles really in a position to take such a decisive step in support of William and Catherine? Those questions lead us to the next part of the story, where we look at the alleged power struggle said to be behind the entire controversy. If we look at this entire story only as a dramatic moment during Garter Day, we may miss the most important part. Because according to this narrative, the issue was not simply about where people stood during the procession. The real issue was the changing balance of power inside the royal family. On one side are King Charles and Queen Camilla's generation. On the other side are Prince William and Princess Catherine, who are seen as the most important faces of the monarchy's next generation. And this change is presented as the center of the entire alleged dispute. Camilla's royal journey has been extraordinary. For many years, she faced public criticism and controversy. Over time, her role changed, and she eventually became queen consort. But according to the narrative of this story, she faced a challenge that she could not easily ignore. That challenge was the growing public popularity of William and Catherine. Whenever the royal family appears at a major public event, cameras often naturally focus on the younger generation. William is the future king, and Catherine is the future queen. Because of this, the story claims that Camilla allegedly began to feel that her own position was slowly moving out of the spotlight. But there is an important difference here. A royal member receiving more media attention than another is not, by itself, proof of a conflict or conspiracy. There is also no independent evidence that Camilla actually planned to remove Catherine from the cameras. Still, in this alleged story, William's reaction is presented as extremely important. According to the narrative, William refused to accept any kind of interference. His alleged message was clear. Catherine should remain beside him and should not be moved back in the ceremonial formation. If this really happened, it would say a lot about William's personality and his future role. As a future king, William is not only expected to protect his family. He will also have to manage relationships between different generations within the monarchy. That is why the alleged hidden camera and evidence are presented as such an important part of the story. According to the narrative, William already suspected that someone might try to change something during the ceremony. If that claim were true, it would mean that he already had doubts about whether the planned ceremonial arrangements would be followed. But this is where the story becomes even more dramatic. The narrative presents William as someone who had already prepared a trap, an alleged surveillance system, an alleged replacement chart, and then the alleged evidence being shown to Charles. However, these dramatic claims about secret operations should not be treated as verified facts without reliable evidence. Now let's look at Catherine. In this story, Catherine is presented in a very different way. She is not shown as aggressive during the confrontation. Instead, the narrative presents her as calm, allegedly telling Camilla that it was wrong to create division between a married couple. This portrayal is also connected to Catherine's public image. During her public appearances, her calm and composed behavior is often highlighted. That is why this story presents William and Catherine as a united front. On one side, there is the alleged tension. On the other side, there is a couple supposedly standing together. That image becomes one of the strongest emotional parts of the narrative. But again, it is important to separate facts from storytelling. There is no confirmed incident showing that William and Catherine had such a confrontation with Camilla during Garter Day. In the same way, there is no reliable confirmation of the claims that Camilla was placed under house arrest or faced such a major ceremonial punishment. So why does this story attract so much attention if these dramatic claims have not been confirmed? The answer may be found in the world's fascination with the royal family. People closely watch every movement, every expression, and even every seating arrangement involving the royals. And when a story brings together the future king, the future queen, the reigning king and queen Camilla, people naturally become interested. But the real picture may be much more complicated. The royal household already has carefully planned responsibilities, ceremonial rules, and public appearances. So calling every change in position a power struggle would not be accurate. Still, this alleged incident raises one important question. Is the next generation of the monarchy slowly moving into a more central position? And could that create tension between the older and younger generations of the royal family? If William and Catherine's public roles continue to grow, their relationship with Charles and Camilla's generation will also remain under public attention. And that is the biggest takeaway from this story. It is not just being presented as a story about one procession. It is being presented as a story about the changing face of the monarchy. But there is one final claim in this narrative that is even bigger. According to the story, Charles did not simply correct Camilla publicly during the procession. He allegedly made a major decision about the future of the monarchy. And if that claim were true, its impact would not be limited to one ceremony. It could affect the entire structure of the royal household. And that alleged decision takes us to the most controversial part of the entire story. So, what does this entire story really mean? The alleged dispute that began during the Garter Day procession has been presented as much more than a simple ceremonial disagreement. According to this narrative, it was a story about the changing balance of power inside the royal family. But one important point must be made clear again. The claims that Camilla deliberately tried to remove Catherine from the cameras, the secret handwritten chart, the alleged hidden surveillance footage, Charles's alleged decree, the removal of ceremonial privileges, and the claim that Camilla was placed under house arrest have not been independently and reliably confirmed. These claims should therefore not be treated as confirmed royal events. Even so, the narrative raises an interesting question. Where is the royal family heading in the future? During King Charles's reign, the roles of William and Catherine have become increasingly important. They represent the next generation of the monarchy, and people around the world closely follow their public appearances. That is why even small details involving their positions, interactions, and public image can quickly attract attention. In this story, Camilla is presented as a royal who reached her position after decades of a difficult journey, but who was then supposedly facing a new generation represented by William and Catherine. However, the reality may be much more complicated. Receiving more public attention is not proof that one royal member is running a campaign against another. In the same way, changing someone's position during a ceremony is not automatically proof of a conspiracy. That is why, when following stories like this, the most important thing is to separate what is being claimed from what has actually been proven. The most dramatic part of this story is the alleged intervention by King Charles. According to the narrative, he stepped in during the procession, told Camilla to return to her position, and then stood with William and Catherine. If such a moment had really happened, it would certainly be extraordinary royal footage. The King and Queen Camilla usually appear together in carefully planned public events, but there is no verified evidence confirming this alleged incident, so it should not be presented as a confirmed event. The same applies to the alleged punishment. The story claims that Camilla lost ceremonial privileges, had her royal engagements limited, and was eventually sent away from the royal family to a remote residence. But major changes like these would normally be difficult to keep completely private. Such a major official decision would be expected to leave credible records or be reported by reliable sources. For that reason, this part of the story should also be treated as an allegation. Still, the emotional ending of the narrative is very powerful. William and Catherine standing together, showing a united front during an alleged conflict, and sending the message that the next generation of the monarchy is ready for its future role. That image is what makes the story so attractive to an audience. But perhaps the biggest lesson from this story is that not every dramatic royal family story is true. It is easy to create an entire story from one photograph, one facial expression, one position in a procession, or a few seconds of video. But royal politics and palace operations are much more complicated than that, and until a claim is confirmed by reliable sources, it should not be accepted as fact. As for William and Catherine, their future roles are clearly important to the monarchy. King Charles is the current monarch, but William is next in the line of succession, and his public partnership with Catherine is an important part of the monarchy's future image. That is why every major or minor event involving them attracts so much attention. Perhaps that is why this alleged Garter Day story quickly became such a dramatic royal narrative. One procession, one alleged change in position, one alleged confrontation, and then an entire story about a possible power struggle. But one question still remains. Did a major royal clash really happen during Garter Day, or was this simply a story that became sensational without enough evidence? Based on the information currently available, these dramatic allegations cannot be treated as confirmed royal facts. So the most responsible conclusion is to keep the claims and verified facts separate. Because when it comes to the royal family, the biggest story is not always the most dramatic one. Sometimes the real story is simply this: what was actually proven and what remained only a claim.